Pascal Valliere is a Canadian anthropologist whose work spans environmental governance, development policy, and the political ecology of agriculture. Trained at Université Laval, he completed a Ph.D. on international environmental governance with a dissertation examining biofuel production projects and their impacts on smallholder communities in Mali. His academic contributions emphasize the intersections of global climate policy, rural livelihoods, and the political dynamics surrounding sustainable development initiatives. He taught in the Department of Anthropology at Université Laval for several years before moving into governmental work, serving as an advisor on international climate cooperation for the Quebec Ministry of the Environment, where he focused on partnerships with French-speaking African and Caribbean regions. He now works as an independent consultant while contributing to research on environmental transitions and the Anthropocene in sub-Saharan Africa. This 2003 anthropology paper looks at the Rainbow Family of Living Light in Quebec, a loose, global network of hippie-style gatherings that mix community living, ecology, and spirituality. The author describes how the movement grew out of the 1960s counterculture in the U.S., then took root in Quebec, bringing together people who want to live more simply, closer to nature, and in peace with each other. Using fieldwork at a summer forest gathering and several in-depth interviews, he shows how people there experiment with an alternative way of life, sharing food, organizing by consensus, sitting in circles, using a talking stick, doing rituals around a sacred fire, and following vegetarian diets. Spiritually, the Rainbow Family blends New Age ideas, native-inspired ceremonies, and eco-spirituality, seeing nature as sacred and humans as part of one big planetary family. The paper also looks at the myths and prophecies that inspire participants, like the Rainbow Warriors and other Indigenous prophecies about a coming time of renewal. In the end, the author argues that the Rainbow Family can be seen as a kind of modern tribe or ecotopic tribe, a small-scale social experiment that tries to model how humans might live together more harmoniously with each other and the Earth. In the opening foreword, the author's main job is to situate the reader. This is a university research work about a real, living group of people, not a recruitment text or a spiritual manual. He explains that he will be talking about the Rainbow Family, a loose, global network of gatherings, as an object of study, and that his descriptions are based on what he saw and heard in the field, filtered through his own point of view as an anthropologist. Like most academic forewords, it likely touches on ethical points, such as protecting people's identities with pseudonyms, and warns that he is describing a very diverse, evolving movement, so no single definition can capture everyone's experience. In simple terms, here's who I am, how I'm approaching this group, and how I'd like you to read what follows. The introduction explains what the Rainbow Family is and why it's interesting to study. The author presents these gatherings as spaces where people try to rebuild a deep connection with nature and with each other, what he calls a kind of eco-spirituality, mixing ecological concern with spiritual practices. He says this movement appears as a reaction against rising individualism and a general feeling that modern life has lost its magic or meaning. At rainbow gatherings, people experiment with collective living, shared decisions, and strong group bonds. He describes this with the idea of an ecotopic tribe, meaning a small, intentional community that tries to live in harmony with nature. He also argues that these new families of affinity are part of a broader retribalization, where people look for community and brother/sisterhood as a way to face today's ecological and social crises. The introduction ends by laying out the structure of the thesis, first the historical context of counterculture and New Age, then the symbolism and organization of the movement, then participants' testimonies, then the rituals, and finally the myths and prophecies that inspire the group. In the methodology section, the author explains how he actually did the research and practice, in down-to-earth terms. His main goal was to understand what happens at rainbow gatherings, the everyday cultural and ritual practices there, and the spiritual ideas behind them. To do that, he combined several tools. First, he did a lot of background reading on topics like communes, hippies, New Age spirituality, ecology and religion, and indigenous spiritual traditions. Then he went and lived on site during a rainbow gathering for several weeks, taking part in daily life, joining circles and rituals, and writing an almost obsessive field diary, hundreds of pages of notes. He also collected documents produced by participants and carried out 6 in-depth interviews, later sending the transcripts back to people so they could correct or approve them. The whole approach is qualitative. Instead of counting numbers, he carefully analyzes people's words and stories. He positions himself in a constructivist perspective, which in plain language means he sees reality as something people build together through their ideas, symbols, and relationships, rather than as a fixed, objective thing independent of culture. Part 1 gives a long backstory that leads up to the Rainbow Family. First, it looks at 19th century utopian communities in the United States, where people tried to live together without private property, strict religion, or traditional marriage, seeing themselves as building a kind of heaven on earth. Then it jumps to the 1960s-70s, the rise of the hippies and counterculture, Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco as a mecca that booms and then collapses under drugs, crime, and tourism, and, in Quebec, the Quiet Revolution and Expo 67, which help young people question consumer society and invent new ways of living together, communes, new villages, alternative networks. The author shows how hippie rural communes mix ecological concerns, spiritual searching, and a desire to escape the technocratic city, but many run into practical limits. At the same time, there's a crisis of the sacred. People lose trust in churches but not in spirituality, and New Age ideas appear, blending science, Eastern religions, ecology, and mysticism. Out of this mix, in the early 1970s after Woodstock, various free festival and communal groups in the U.S., like the Hog Farmers and others, come together and create the Rainbow Family of living light, and similar dynamics in Quebec's counterculture eventually give birth to a local Rainbow Family there too. In the 1800s, the United States saw the rise of many experimental communities, groups of people who wanted to live together in simpler, more cooperative ways. These communities rejected mainstream society's rules about property, hierarchy, and strict religion, hoping to create a more equal and spiritually meaningful life. Although most of these groups eventually dissolved, they left behind a long tradition of Americans trying to build small utopian societies. This history forms an early foundation for later counterculture experiments, including what would eventually inspire movements like the Rainbow Family. In the 1960s, a new youth movement emerged, the hippies, who questioned war, capitalism, racism, and rigid social norms. They embraced peace, free expression, communal living, alternative spirituality, and a deep respect for nature. Psychedelics, music festivals, and a rejection of materialism became central to their culture. This hippie wave created a huge cultural shift. Millions of young people began imagining new ways of living, and their ideals of freedom, ecology, and universal love would later help shape the Rainbow Gatherings. San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury became the symbolic heart, or mecca, of the hippie movement. At first it was a vibrant center of creativity, music, spirituality, and communal living, attracting young people from around the world. But its rapid growth brought problems: overcrowding, drug abuse, crime, and commercialization. By the early 1970s, the scene collapsed under its own weight, illustrating the difficulties of sustaining an idealistic counterculture inside an urban environment. This breakdown pushed many toward rural, back-to-the-land experiments, another step toward the creation of the Rainbow Family. In Quebec, the 1960s marked the Quiet Revolution, a time of fast modernization, questioning of religious authority, and a surge of new freedoms. Young Quebecers began rejecting rigid traditions and exploring alternative lifestyles similar to those of the American counterculture. Events like Expo 67 exposed the province to global ideas, encouraging experimentation in art, politics, ecology, and community living. This cultural opening laid the groundwork for Quebec's own branch of the Rainbow movement to take root a few decades later. Many hippies responded to urban chaos by forming rural communes, intentional communities where people shared resources, worked the land, practiced organic agriculture, and tried to live in harmony. These communes aimed to escape consumerism and reconnect with nature and spirituality. While some succeeded briefly, many failed because of lack of farming experience, internal conflict, and financial instability. Still, these experiments showed a strong desire for communal living and became direct ancestors of the open, forest-based rainbow gatherings that emerged soon after. During the mid-20th century, traditional religion lost influence in North America, creating what many called a crisis of the sacred. People did not stop seeking meaning, they simply turned elsewhere. Young people began exploring alternative spiritual paths, from Eastern philosophies to neo-paganism and ecological spirituality. This era saw a desire to re-sacralize life by recovering a sense of wonder, ritual, and connection to the natural world. Rainbow gatherings would later embody this shift by blending ritual, nature worship, indigenous teachings, and communal spirituality. The New Age movement grew alongside the counterculture, mixing influences from Eastern religions, self-help philosophy, holistic health, ecology, meditation, and esoteric traditions. It encouraged personal transformation, intuitive knowledge, and the belief that humanity was entering a new spiritual era. These ideas spread widely through books, workshops, and festivals. New Age spirituality became one of the major ideological sources feeding into the Rainbow Family, which adopted many of its ideas about global harmony, healing, and the sacredness of nature. The Rainbow Family emerged in the early 1970s, shortly after Woodstock and the collapse of urban hippie hubs. Various groups, hippie communes, free festival organizers, pacifists, environmentalists, and spiritual seekers, began gathering in national forests for free, open, non-commercial celebrations. They created a model based on consensus, shared meals, vegetarian communal kitchens, chanting, ritual circles, and respect for nature. The first official Rainbow Gathering was held in 1972 in Colorado, launching a worldwide tradition of annual gatherings. Origins of the movement in Quebec tells the story of how the Rainbow Family took root in Quebec, step by step, from small countercultural groups in Montreal to a fully connected family able to host a world gathering. The author starts by saying that the first Rainbow Family gathering in Quebec was held in 1987, but insists this didn't come out of nowhere. To really understand its birth, he goes back to the late 1970s, when people were slowly planting the seeds of the movement in Quebec. At that time, around 1974 to 1975, street performers, musicians, jugglers, clowns, and other artists working in Old Montreal were being harassed by police, tickets, arrests. In response, they organized themselves into the Association des Amuseurs Publics to defend their right to perform and to coordinate their activities. From this core grew a more permanent base. In 1976 they created a workers' cooperative and opened a cafe-restaurant called Le Matin des Magiciens, the Morning of the Magicians. This place served at once as a workplace and a home for many artists and craftspeople, and was a pioneer in vegetarian and organic food in Montreal, running until 1981. Around the cafe clustered a whole mini-universe of groups, including bands like the Pouet Pouet Band and the Wonder Brass Band. At the same time, members of a commune called Les Gypsies Solaires set up a mobile vegetarian kitchen that traveled to Rainbow gatherings, creating some of the very first direct links between Quebec and the American Rainbow Family. In 1978, the founders of Les Matins des Magiciens took a bigger step by creating the Société Écologique Agro-Culturelle des Laurentides (SEAC) and buying land at Lac Foster, in the Laurentians. Their goal was ambitious: to build Quebec's first eco-village, combining artistic production, crafts, painting, music, with agriculture. SEAC was plugged into wider alternative networks. It was listed as an affiliated community in the growing International Rainbow Family Network, and it belonged to La Balance, a cooperative warehouse grouping natural food co-ops and buying clubs. The Balance commissioned SEAC to organize a big event, the Fête du Réseau Network Festival, to help fund its activities, and this festival laid the groundwork for something even larger. Out of this came the first Rendezvous d'Août, a summer festival where more than 1,000 people passed through over 4 days. The event was held every year until 1984 and acted as a meeting hub for different alternative communities, weaving a network of affinities in a time of intense cultural creativity. Importantly, many practices that would later be central to Quebec Rainbow gatherings were already present there, like gathering in a circle and using a talking stick during meetings or rituals. However, the author stresses that these festivals were not yet real rainbow gatherings, because they took place on private land and charge an entry fee, both of which go against Rainbow Family consensual principles of being free and on public land. The 1980 referendum defeat in Quebec brought a kind of emotional crash. Many people felt their ideals and dreams had collapsed. Within SEAC, economic pressures created internal tensions and led to declining participation from 1983 onward. In the same year, however, a new nonprofit called La Joie Creative, Creative Joy, made up of up-and-coming artists, showed a strong desire to organize a genuine rainbow gathering in Quebec. The years 1985 and 1986 were marked by a general slowdown of activity. Many Quebecers chose to go recharge at American rainbow gatherings, especially one in California in 1986, which apparently motivated several people to gather the energy needed to finally hold a rainbow gathering on Quebec soil. This work culminated in the first Quebec Rainbow gatherings. According to the author, the first one took place in Sweet Beatrix, Laurentians, in 1987, followed by another in Belcombe, Abitibi, in 1988. There is still some internal debate within the Quebec family about whether these two should count as true rainbow gatherings, again because they were held on private land, which clashes with the usual rainbow standard. In contrast, there is no doubt about the status of the 1989 gathering at Lac Squatek, in the Témiscouata region. This one is clearly recognized as a full rainbow, on appropriate land and in line with the movement's principles. From there, the author says, a family was born, one that has continued to grow in a spirit of respect and fraternity. From its early years, the Quebec family, Famille Québécoise, built strong ties with rainbow groups in the United States and English Canada, gradually strengthening and expanding its network. One of the co-founders, quoted by the author, notes that a solid new generation is now in place, strong enough to ensure the movement's growth and that the tribe is now able to organize itself. By the time the thesis is written, 2003, the Quebec Rainbow Family is described as being on an upward slope, preparing to welcome the International Rainbow Family the following year for the Rassemblement Arc-en-Ciel, un monde de l'île de la Tortue, Turtle Island One World Rainbow Gathering, at a site in Quebec. The author closes the subsection by saying that this event will open a new chapter in the history of the Quebec family, marking its transition from a regional offshoot to a key player in the global rainbow network. Informal structure inside informality, decomposing the colors of a rainbow, the author first explains that the rainbow symbol functions as a universal archetype across many cultures. He shows that rainbows appear in mythologies worldwide as bridges, signs of peace, renewals after destruction, or links between humans and the divine. Because of this deep, shared meaning, the rainbow family embraces the rainbow as a symbol of unity, diversity, harmony with nature, and spiritual rebirth. The rainbow's many colors represent individuality within collective oneness, which mirrors the movement's belief that each person brings a unique color to the community. By grounding the movement in an archetype found throughout human history, participants see themselves as part of an ancient and cross-cultural spiritual continuity rather than as a modern invention. The second part examines how the rainbow movement organizes itself despite having no leaders, laws, or formal structures. The author describes the movement as intentionally informal, rejecting hierarchy, membership lists, official roles, or legal status. Yet, within this apparent informality, he identifies consistent formal patterns. Decisions are made by consensus, gatherings follow recurring traditions like circles, communal kitchens, and sacred fires, natural leadership emerges through respect rather than authority, and participants are guided by shared principles such as peace, nonviolence, ecological respect, and openness to all. The absence of hierarchy is not chaos. Rather, the movement relies on fluid, self-organizing practices inspired by Indigenous models of community and council. In this way, the formal within the informal is the art of maintaining harmony without rules, using traditions and shared values instead of official structures. In first contacts with the movement, the author shares how different people first discovered the rainbow family, usually through chance encounters, friends, or relatives who brought them along. For many, the first gathering feels like stepping into another world. They arrive in the forest and suddenly find circles of people singing, cooking together, and living simply in nature. At first, newcomers can feel disoriented or intimidated by the nudity, openness, and intense sense of community, but they're also struck by how quickly they're welcomed as brothers and sisters. Over time, these first contacts often turn into a deep personal turning point. People talk about a before and after the rainbow, as if the movement opened a door to new ways of living, relating, and seeing themselves. In family, brotherhood, and neo-tribalism, the author explains how participants experience the rainbow family as a real family, even though people are not blood relatives. Calling each other brother and sister is more than a cute habit. It reflects a strong feeling that they belong to one big human clan. This sense of family goes together with what the author calls neo-tribalism. People create small, temporary tribes based on shared values, mutual aid, and intimacy around the fire. Unlike modern society, where many feel isolated and anonymous, the rainbow gatherings give them a sense of being seen, needed, and held by a group. For some, this brotherhood feels bigger than friendship and crosses cultural or national boundaries. In A Kind of Universalism, Emerging Planetary Consciousness, the author shows that many rainbow participants see themselves as part of a planet-wide human community, not just a local group. They speak about one human family beyond race, religion, or nationality, and gatherings often include people from many countries. This feeds a feeling of planetary consciousness, the idea that humans are interconnected and share one Earth, one destiny. For some, the rainbow family is a small-scale model of what humanity could become, more peaceful, cooperative, and aware of its unity. This is what the author calls a kind of universalism, a belief that beneath our differences, we're all part of the same global family. Participants often describe the rainbow as a school of life where everyone is both student and teacher. There are no formal classes, but you learn constantly how to cook for hundreds of people, make decisions by consensus, build a teepee, manage conflicts peacefully, or simply listen more deeply. People share skills, songs, stories, and spiritual practices freely. This environment pushes individuals to grow, socially, emotionally, and spiritually. For some, it's more educational than any formal school because it teaches them how to live, cooperate, and take responsibility in a community. Contacts with the subtle spiritual world focuses on how many participants feel they are in contact with subtle world's energies, spirits, ancestors, or non-ordinary states of consciousness. Some talk about feeling the energy of the circle, sensing vibrations, or having powerful dreams and visions at gatherings. Others describe experiences with sacred plants, like cannabis, peyote, or mushrooms, used in a ritual context to learn, heal, or receive guidance, not just to party. A few people with shamanic training help hold rituals, but they usually avoid setting themselves up as gurus. Overall, the rainbow space is seen as a place where the veil between everyday life and the spiritual dimension becomes thinner. In emphasizing the importance of the sacred and spirituality, the author shows that, for many rainbow participants, spirituality is central, even if there is no official religion. The sacred is not locked inside a church or temple. It's woven into daily life, lighting the sacred fire, offering food to the river, singing before eating, or holding hands in a circle. People come from very different paths, Christian, Buddhist, Native-inspired, New Age, etc., but the rainbow encourages respect for all sincere spiritual quests. Some participants dedicate themselves to reminding others of the importance of ritual, gratitude, and inner work. The goal isn't to convert anyone, but to create a space where everyone can reconnect with their own sense of the sacred. Ecological and planetary consciousness explores the strong ecological awareness in the movement. Participants see the Earth as a living being and speak of Mother Earth with affection and respect. Practices like leaving no trace, camping far from waterways, eating vegetarian or vegan at the main kitchen, and making offerings to natural elements are all ways of living that respect nature. For many, environmental crises and climate disruption are signs that humanity has broken its relationship with the planet. The Rainbow Family tries, in its own fragile way, to model a different relationship, one based on gratitude, simplicity, and care for all living beings. This ecological mindset is tightly linked to their planetary consciousness. Caring for the Earth is seen as caring for the whole human family, now and in the future. The circle is the basic shape of rainbow life. People eat in a circle, meet in a circle, and hold ceremonies in a circle. The author links this to Indigenous traditions where the circle symbolizes equality and the interconnectedness of all beings, humans, animals, plants, earth, water, fire, stars, all form one continuous ring of life. In practice, forming a large circle helps maintain group harmony and cohesion. Several people told the researcher they could feel the energy drop when bad weather prevented them from gathering this way. The circle lets everyone see and be seen and creates a feeling of common union with the community. It's not just a convenient shape, it's a living symbol of unity and balance. Once the circle is formed, voices join together in the chanting of Om, a sacred sound from Indian spiritual traditions. The author explains that, in Hindu philosophy, Om is the primal sound of the universe, with its three parts, A, U, M, corresponding to waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. At rainbow gatherings, Om is chanted in unison before meals and councils to harmonize the group and focus attention. Participants describe very vivid inner experiences. One woman visualizes huge columns of light descending through the crown of the head, flowing down the spine, and rooting in the earth. Others say it helps them connect with the cosmos, feel the present moment, enter a trance state, or open channels of light and extrasensory perception. Several interviewees spontaneously mentioned Om as one of the most powerful and calming practices, saying it helps shy or closed people open up and feel part of the group's shared energy. The talking stick, or talking feather, is a ritual object used in councils to manage speech and listening. According to the author, one of the early rainbow elders taught this practice from Native American tradition, and the same talking stick has been used for more than 15 years in the Quebec family. It is decorated with bird feathers, braided sage, hemp necklaces, and semi-precious stones, and is treated as sacred. It should never be laid flat where the feathers might be damaged, and offerings of tobacco are sometimes made to it, following Indigenous protocol. Whoever holds the stick has the right to speak without interruption, while everyone else listens. Participants say this object gives them courage to speak and creates a real sense of equality, especially because there is no official leader in the circle. One person felt they had undergone a true initiation with the talking stick, which helped them claim their place and experience deep freedom of expression. Decisions at rainbow gatherings are made by consensus, not by voting. In a council circle, the talking stick goes around in the direction of the sun, clockwise, giving each person a turn to speak until a shared decision emerges. This style, inspired by Indigenous practices, aims to be healthy, harmonious, orderly, and as democratic as possible, making sure everyone affected by a decision has a chance to influence it. When someone makes a proposal, it is accepted if no one takes the stick again to object or offer a different proposal. If the group remains silent for about 15 seconds, they consider that consensus has been reached. The goal is unity, not winning against opponents. The process tries to balance individual voices with the needs of the whole group. Natural leaders are recognized not by formal titles but by the trust, competence, and wisdom others see in them, and no individual is supposed to override the will of the circle. Finally, the author focuses on offerings to natural elements, especially the sacred fire and the river, as key rituals that re-sacralize everyday actions. The sacred fire is lit in a central, consecrated spot and is seen as the heart of the rainbow, a place for gathering, ceremonies, and silent communion. People are told never to throw trash into it and to place wood as if making an offering to the fire spirit. In one striking episode, heavy rains caused the river to flood and threaten the camp. During a communal meal, a sister suggested making a food offering to the spirit of the river, ceremonially placing a plate's contents into the turbulent water. The next day, the water stopped rising and began to recede. Later, when the fire was relit, the researcher himself was invited to offer tobacco to the spirit of the fire, and another participant explained he always offers tobacco when cutting a live tree for a sweat lodge or teepee, to thank its sacrifice. These offerings build a kind of dialogue with water, fire, earth, and air, expressing humility, gratitude, and the sense that humans and elements share the same substance. Songs reinforce this idea with lines like, "The earth is my body, the water is my blood, the air is my breath, and the fire is my spirit." Prophetic corpus and mythical vision explains the famous Rainbow Warrior's prophecy, which has become central to the Rainbow family's identity. According to the legend, popularized through New Age writings in the 1960s and 70s, there will come a time when the earth is sick, animals die, the air and waters are poisoned, and humanity has lost its spiritual compass. At that moment, people from all races, colors, and backgrounds will rise as warriors of the rainbow, united not by violence but by love, peace, and a mission to heal the planet. Rainbow participants see themselves as part of this symbolic army, not in a literal war but in a global transformation toward ecological respect and spiritual harmony. The prophecy gives the movement a sense of collective purpose and moral direction. The author then presents several Hopi prophecies that resonate strongly with rainbow beliefs. The Hopi speak of cycles of destruction and renewal, in which humanity repeatedly loses balance with nature and must relearn sacred ways. A key idea is that earth changes, droughts, storms, ecological collapse, are signs that humans have strayed from the path of respect and humility. Rainbow participants often interpret their gatherings as a step toward the restoration of harmony foretold in Hopi teachings. Although these prophecies have complex cultural meanings within Hopi communities, the rainbow movement tends to interpret them broadly as spiritual warnings about environmental decline and the need to rebalance human life with the natural world. The White Bison Nation describes the powerful symbol of the white bison, an animal considered sacred by many Plains Indigenous nations. According to Lakota tradition, the birth of a white bison signals a major spiritual turning point, a moment of renewal or awakening for humanity. The author recounts stories cherished by rainbow participants, a white bison shape appearing in the snow during the first U.S. rainbow gathering in 1972, and the real birth of a white buffalo calf named Miracle in 1994, which many interpreted as a fulfillment of prophecy. For the rainbow family, the white bison is a sign that their movement aligns with a larger cosmic or spiritual shift, reinforcing their belief that a global rebirth is underway. The Seven Fires prophecy, originating in the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, tradition, describes 7 eras in the spiritual evolution of North America. The seventh fire, associated with the present, foretells the arrival of new people who will seek out the wisdom of Indigenous elders and choose between 2 paths, one leading to destruction, the other to an age of peace, love, and unity. If humanity chooses correctly, an 8th fire of eternal harmony will be lit. Rainbow participants see themselves as part of the generation making that choice. The prophecy encourages them to approach Indigenous teachings with humility, learn from the land, and contribute to a collective awakening. When New Age meets Indigenous prophecies explains how the Rainbow Family blends New Age spirituality with Indigenous prophetic traditions. The author notes that this fusion is not academically precise but emotionally powerful. Rainbow participants weave together myths, visions, and teachings from many cultures into a unified storyline about global transformation. For them, these prophecies, Hopi, Lakota, Anishinaabe, and New Age, are not strict historical doctrines but symbolic maps guiding humanity toward ecological healing and spiritual unity. This merging creates a shared mythic framework that gives meaning to the gatherings, motivates activism, and frames participants' experiences as part of a much larger cosmic shift. In the conclusion, the author starts by highlighting how diverse and deeply personal the meaning of the Rainbow movement is for its participants. For some, the Rainbow Family is something anchored in the heart, tied to unconditional love and a strong, almost unshakable faith in life. They describe it using images like yin and yang and all the colors at once, to express how it embraces opposites and diversity together. Others see it as a unique experience that is different at every gathering, a tradition in the making, constantly changing and evolving. Some participants feel it is becoming a growing global phenomenon that already has a positive impact on its environment and hints at the possibility of a better future. One person insists it isn't just a utopia but a realistic way of living, proof that people can live peacefully and cooperatively while learning to self-manage instead of handing their power to governments. Another simply says this lifestyle is, for him, the best way to be happy and a logical step toward creating eco-villages. The author then admits that, given all this, it is almost impossible to fully summarize what the Rainbow movement represents for everyone involved. Like any human institution, the movement depends entirely on the men and women who bring it to life, who feed it with their creativity, imagination, and sensitivity. Each person interprets it, lives it, and makes it live in their own way. This produces what he calls idiosyncracy. Each person's unique way of being, seeing, and feeling shapes the symbolic universe of the movement. In other words, the Rainbow Family is not a rigid system but a living, changing tapestry woven from many individual experiences. Despite this diversity, the qualitative analysis of interviews shows clear common threads. The author notes a strong convergence in opinions and perceptions among the people he interviewed, which also lines up with what is found in rainbow-related texts. Taken together, the data show that the Rainbow movement draws on multiple historical and cultural sources, earlier communal experiments, the hippie and countercultural movements, New Age spirituality, ecological thinking, and various forms of Indigenous, especially Native American, spirituality, among others. The Rainbow Family is thus not a random invention. It is a crossroads where many past experiments and ideas meet and are reworked into something new. The conclusion also underlines the creative effort invested in building a concrete communal way of life. Testimonies reveal how much imagination and practical work go into creating a living space based on cooperation, harmony, and respect for diversity, where social, cultural, spiritual, and environmental ideals are brought together. The forest gatherings are clear expressions of a desire for retribalization. People are trying to rebuild social relations on an egalitarian and fraternal basis, closer to what they imagine as traditional tribal life. It is for this reason that the author argues the movement is the archetype of an ecotopic tribe, a small-scale community experiment oriented toward ecological living and deep group bonds, somewhere between utopia and reality. Another key point in the conclusion is the role of eco-spirituality in myth. The findings show that the development of an eco-spiritual worldview naturally brings with it rituals, beliefs, and a prophetic/mythical corpus, like the Rainbow Warrior prophecy, Hopi teachings, the White Bison, the Seven Fires prophecy, etc. These stories and symbols help solidify the ideology of the movement. By consciously connecting to great cultural myths, the Rainbow Family shows a desire to redefine the relationship between humans and nature, moving away from domination and exploitation toward respect, harmony, and even dialogue with the elements. In doing so, the movement expresses the urgency of a new ecological paradigm to respond to environmental crises. The author also reflects on his own work, recognizing its limits and scope. He describes the research as modest but useful. It has explored a portion of the vast symbolic system the movement puts into play, a complex scaffolding built from many heterogeneous influences. Like any symbolic construction, this system's main function is to create meaning within the emotional, social, cultural, and spiritual experiences of the people who engage with it. The thesis doesn't claim to capture everything. Rather, it maps out some of the main pillars of this meaning-making process. Finally, the conclusion looks toward the future. At the time of writing, 2003, the Quebec Rainbow Family is preparing to host the Turtle Island One World Rainbow Gathering in 2004. The author suggests that it would be very interesting, in future research, to see how this major international gathering will contribute to inventing new rituals and how it will fit into the movement's prophetic and mythical vision. In other words, the story of the Rainbow Family is still being written, and the next chapters may further transform its practices, its symbolism, and its place in the wider ecological and spiritual landscape. I arrive by bus first, then by thumb. The last driver leaves me at the end of a dirt road and points his chin toward the trees. "It's over there, the tribe," he says, half amused, half curious. The sun is low, and the air smells like pine and damp earth. I shoulder my pack and follow the faint sound of drums and laughter that rolls through the forest like a distant river. The trail winds between spruce and birch, past hand-painted signs nailed to trunks, "Welcome home, peace, shanty." I pass a few people coming the other way, barefoot, smiling, each one greeting me with a simple bienvenue, frere, or welcome home, brother, as if I'd been here 1,000 times instead of never. After 20 minutes of walking, the path opens into a clearing and I stop, because it feels like I've stepped through a membrane into another world. Teepees rise from the ground like pale conical trees, their poles stark against the sky. A big communal kitchen stands under a tarp, smoke curling up from enormous pots. Children run in packs, half-dressed, hair wild, like forest spirits. Someone is playing guitar near a fire. Another person is carving a spoon with a short knife. Voices mingle in French and English, and here and there I catch other languages, Spanish, a few native words I don't yet recognize. My first thought is that it's chaotic. My second is that it's strangely peaceful, as if the forest itself were holding everything in place. I meet Shanti before I even find a spot for my tent. She is sitting on the ground with a bundle of long poles stretched out in front of her, shaving them carefully with a chisel. Her hands move with slow precision, bits of wood falling at her feet. When I ask what she's building, she looks up with luminous eyes and answers, "My teepee." She tells me she's been working on it for weeks, and that this gathering is the first time she will put it up. As we talk, people stop by to offer advice, borrow tools, or simply check on her progress. A tall man leans in, runs his hand along one of the poles, and nods. "Il est beau ton teepee," he says. He's going to be strong. It's not just a shelter she's building, it feels like she's erecting a piece of herself in the middle of the clearing. The first evening, someone blows a conch shell, its call long and wavering. People begin to stream toward an open space near the kitchen. I follow instinctively and find myself drawn into a large circle, bodies forming a ring around the central fire pit. Hands reach out to join mine. I don't know the people on either side of me, but our fingers interlace as if we've done this for years. For a moment there is only the crackle of the fire and the wind in the branches. Then a single voice begins the Om, low and steady, and the circle answers. The sound rises and thickens, one long vibration that seems to pass through the ground and up my spine. Later, Shanti will tell me that during Om she feels herself recenter ver l'intérieur, to come back to the center of herself. Someone else will describe huge columns of light descending through the top of the head and rooting into the earth. In that first circle, I don't see columns or light, I simply feel something loosen in my chest, as if the sound has slipped between my ribs and is rearranging the furniture inside. Over the next days, the rhythm of the gathering reveals itself. Mornings begin with the conch and the circle, Om and breakfast. The food, strictly vegetarian here in the main kitchen, is passed bowl to bowl, each person serving the next. In the afternoons people scatter, some to the river to swim, some to workshops on singing or yoga, some to the kid village to build improbable playgrounds out of rope and branches. Gnome, a lean man with sunburned shoulders and long hair tied back, spends hours planning a garden suspended in the trees for the children. He explains that he first came here as a disillusioned 20-something and left feeling he had found his real family. "Jamie sentais comme un orphelin qui retrouve sa vraie famille," he says. I felt like an orphan finding his true family. In the evenings, the circle shifts from meals to council. At one of these, I see the talking stick for the first time. It's a piece of wood adorned with feathers, sage, beads, and stones, worn smooth by years of hands. The person holding it speaks, everyone else listens. The stick moves slowly around the circle, traveling clockwise like the sun. Sometimes it completes one loop, sometimes three. When it's my turn, the stick feels surprisingly heavy. I hear myself speaking more honestly than I expected, about why I'm here, what I'm looking for, what scares me. Later, someone tells me they had their true initiation into the rainbow when they first took the stick, when they finally claimed their right to speak. In that circle, leadership doesn't come from titles or age, it flows toward whoever carries responsibility gently, whoever speaks with clarity and care. When a proposal comes forward, about where to move the toilets, how to welcome newcomers, whether to invite local police for coffee instead of confrontation, silence after the last voice is often enough to signal consensus. No one raises a hand to vote, the group simply settles around a shared decision like water finding its level. On the third day, the weather turns. Heavy rain falls through the night, and by morning the river is swollen and brown, carrying branches and foam. Some camps pitched too close to the water's edge are suddenly in danger. We watch as one tent is actually pulled from the bank and swallowed by the current. At the midday meal, the mood is uneasy. The conversation turns to the American rule that camps should be kept at least 30 meters from any water source to avoid pollution and flooding. On Napa respect set loi la, someone says. We didn't respect that rule. A woman stands in the circle and speaks quietly. She says the river is angry. Then she suggests an offering. We walk together to the edge of the torrent. She carries a plate of food, rice, vegetables, a piece of bread, and kneels at the bank. Without drama, she thanks the river for its strength, for its water, for the life it brings. Then she tips the plate, letting the food slip into the churning brown. The next day the rain stops. The river doesn't recede instantly, but the water level holds steady and then slowly begins to fall. Some call it coincidence, others say the spirit of the river has accepted the gesture. Either way, the story will be told and retold as one of those moments where the boundary between ritual and reality seems thin. The connection to the land here feels particularly strong. People talk about la Terre with a mix of affection and urgency. Songs around the fire include a refrain that I hear in French, English, and Spanish. La terre est mon corps, l'eau est mon sang, l'air est mon souffle, et le feu est mon esprit. The earth is my body, the water is my blood, the air my breath, the fire my spirit. It is easy to imagine this line being sung at a gathering in the United States as well, but in Quebec, the words take on a specific texture, wrapped in the history of this territory, in the overlapping presences of Quebecois, Innu, Atacamaquah, Anishinaabe, and others who have walked these forests far longer than any of us. One evening, an elder from Manawan arrives, invited by friends who have been moving back and forth between rainbow gatherings and Atacamaco territory for years. He sits near the sacred fire, quiet, listening. Later he performs a marriage between two young rainbow lovers. The ceremony is simple, a few words about commitment, the circle of life, the responsibilities of partnership, spoken in his language and translated in whispers. For the couple and for many who witness it, that moment becomes a knot tying together the Rainbow family and the people of this land, not as identical, but as relatives learning from one another. Compared to the huge gatherings described in the United States, tens of thousands of people spilling through a national forest, political tensions running high, police and media hovering, the Quebec gatherings feel smaller, more intimate, like a big extended family reunion rather than a city of nomads. There is still chaos, lost children, drunken latecomers who haven't heard about the alcohol-free agreement, disagreements about how traditional the rituals should be. But there is also an unmistakable Quebec flavor, the constant switching between French and English, jokes about politics in Montreal, half-serious talk about building a permanent eco-village, references to the quiet revolution and the failures of both church and state to feed the hunger that brings people here. At night, around the fire, stories circulate. Loma tells of his travels to Brazil, Peru, India, of the time the Quebec family brought its teepee and its songs to a gathering in South America and helped decide, by consensus, that the global rainbow would come to Quebec the following year. Surya weaves metaphors about surfing the wave of life, about each person climbing their own sacred mountain at their own pace. Hayana speaks about her work accompanying women in childbirth, seeing in newborns a new kind of consciousness, more awake, more open. As she talks, her children interrupt her again and again, pulling on her sleeve, climbing into her lap. She laughs and lets them, never losing the thread of what she's saying. The line between personal life and spiritual vocation blurs, as it does for so many here. Over time, as days in the forest stretch out, the gathering begins to feel less like an event and more like a village that has always existed. You learn where to find the kid village, where the musicians tend to cluster, where the quiet path leads if you need to be alone. You see the same faces in different roles. The man who was stirring dal yesterday is leading a chant today. The woman who held the talking stick with trembling hands on the first night is now holding the circle steady as people argue about where to put the compost. Small frictions arise and are worked through. There is no perfection here, just a constant, imperfect attempt to live according to the values people talk about: respect, sharing, listening, love. When I finally shoulder my pack to leave, the gathering is already thinning. Some teepees have come down. Trails that seemed so full of life a few days ago are quiet. The sacred fire, which has burned continuously since the beginning, is now a bed of glowing coals. Someone adds a last piece of wood, not out of obligation but as a farewell. As I walk back along the forest path, the sounds of the gathering fade behind me, replaced once again by wind in the trees and the distant rush of the river. What stays with me is not one ritual or one prophecy, not even one spectacular vision. It is the memory of hands joined in a circle, of a woman carving teepee poles while talking about her life, of a man explaining that he feels less like a citizen and more like a member of a tribe, of children running in and out of their parents' interviews, claiming their space in the story. It is the sense that here, in this forest in Quebec, on land that remembers other gatherings, other fires, other songs, people are trying, awkwardly, earnestly, to relearn how to be a family, not only with each other, but with the earth and with all those who came before.